Well, good day. Armico Fisher here with Jim Hanson. And this is going to be an interesting conversation, one that I don't always have a chance to really dive into social, political, cultural history of, in a way, history, but we're going to focus on empire, imperialism, and the various, forms of those today. Well, why would we do that? Because we are certainly facing, at least where I live in North America, and Jim lives in America, we are up at front and center with a very different kind of regime that we haven't seen in American history probably before, although we've seen parts of it. And yes, in the second half of our talk today, after we do something on the history of empire, which Jim Hanson is very, very well familiar with, he has done his research on, he's written several books. We'll get to that. And so the second half, we will talk about America. We'll talk about the Trump, the Musk, and all kinds of things that are going on of madness and or whatever opportunities can come from it. But I want to start, if you don't mind, Jim. I know you're in just outside of St. Louis, Missouri. You live in the States, and you know what? We met in 2008, 17 years ago, when I and my wife moved down to Carbondale, Illinois, and I was invited by Hugh Muldoon to come to a book club meeting. And that was at the Gaia House, just off the campus of Southern Illinois and University. And so I went to that meeting, and Jim showed up, and we had this conversation, and I was aware that this is a very erudite speaker with very strong views and opinions. And Jim is a force to be reckoned with in conversations about theology, philosophy, history, sociology, economics. And I knew I was with someone who was a grand thinker, and I really appreciated his critiques of me. He was endlessly critical of some of my own work, and he read some of my work. But always in the end, there was a collegiality and a friendship that had grown and is still here 17 years later. After some in that book club have now passed away. Jim is now 85. Hello, Jim.
Well, thank you, Michael, for that introduction. Yes, I remember well when we first met. You
Yep.
came to our philosophy meeting, um, and we were trying to figure out Jacques Derrida's essay. I forget the particular essay, uh, but we were just not, nobody was quite understanding it. So uh, we came, I recall, and you joined us again, and we said, "Well, what do you think?" And you gave us a very lucid description, this analysis of what Derrida was trying to say in that essay, and I was very surprised. I You were introduced to me as some artist guy who also knows a lot about psychology. So I'll return the compliment. Yes, we have various interests, and I just love having conversations with people who bring in a broad perspective from different disciplines. Yeah, yeah. Um,
Thank you, Jim. Well, let me start off today before Jim gets a chance to dive in. I want to say something that probably him and I will somewhat agree in maybe one way or another. The great Bill Moyer, who recently died, passed at age 91, was certainly one of my favorite interviewers. Um, Watched many of his interviews. I'm sure you have, Jim, over the
yes.
years. And I remember in a recent talk he gave just before he passed, he was asked in an interview, Bill, what do you think makes you a good interviewer? And he said, I've been told by many people what makes me a good interviewer, and I got paid for this, was I'm a good listener. So today, I will do my Bill Moyers thing and really attend to what Jim has to say, and I will come in now and then with some comments. But unlike Bill Moyer, I have my own characteristic style. And here I am up in Canada, and here I am as this eclectic thinker, and I am very interested in where humanity is going and the future of this planet, have been most of my adult life. I'm going to start off with a provocation. This comes from reading some of the notes of Jim. And I see Jim as an independent scholar myself. I see him as someone with a historical, sociological, philosophical, theological sensibility about the entire way humans and consciousness are evolving, develop, de-evolve, re-evolve, and a very sensitive ear toward the future. I too am a futurist. I think today we're going to hear from Jim. We're going to hear some of his views of the long-term pursuit of empire and how America got trapped in that long trajectory of empire seeking. I asked the question in my mind, and I think some viewers will ask as well, could that have ever have gone another way? Was it possible America could have become a nation state, a new country, without the trajectory of empire and its earlier precedents? But that besides the point, could they have chosen differently? And is there a way to choose differently now? Is a question on my mind. I think in some ways the conversation today will at least think about that. Is there another possibility, in other words, that we don't have to just be Machiavellianism in this new movement of leadership style that has become so contemporary, so popularized, and of course is leading to much of fascism growth today. But what I want to ask also, is there a matter of scale as such a problem here, where we are now in such a machinic, digital, AI type of world, where even if you could bring in a humanitarian leader in any nation, let's say in America as a new possibility, who doesn't operate in that fear-based Machiavellian way, is there still a possibility? Or is the scale of the mega system so huge, so machinic, already dedicated and embedded in codes and in ways and in technologies that would just wipe out any humanistic venture, even of renewal and possibility? And all of that, of course, facing ecocide, suicide on a massive scale. And I provoke, are we in fact trying to deal with an addict that just won't turn around until they hit the bottom? And for us as a nation state, that bottom of that addiction may very well be the elimination of life, a lot of life, anyways, on this planet, and the not too dear future. So I ask this question, and I think of David Suzuki recently saying, when he was asked, what do you think of where we're going, David? And he says, it's too late. And so I ask Jim, not necessarily directly, I ask you as audience to think about, is there no more hope for hope if you are imagining a future with a reversal of empire? There's my provocation. Over to Jim. Why don't you give us some of the big history and some of your authorship and scholarship in the history of empire?
Yeah, let's get the history down first, and we don't need to spend a lot of time on it, but it goes back to the Revolutionary War and the the late 18th century, and uh, and America's break with England was more than any other factor, I would argue, was over empire. England was a sea-based colonial empire. England did not have the manpower or resources to go inland and take over to extend their empire. They preferred coastal cities where their navy was their biggest power. And this came about, this difference of empire came about with the French and Indian War. And the 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 young Americans who were then actually colonialists uh, fought and died with fighting the French and Indians over the right to expand westward. And England wanted no part of it. And England concluded that war with France by agreeing that nobody should cross the Appalachian Mountains and infringe upon what France still considered its colonial area. And that was this feeling of being sold out and this deep resentment that England took away any possibility, at least if they agreed, if the Americans agreed with the agreement. Well, the Americans didn't. And the Americans, George Washington's brother was one of the first Americans to go over into Ohio territory and start the expansion westward. And so that's a little bit of history right there that all the fathers, Washington, Jefferson, Ben Franklin, mild-mannered Ben Franklin, all spoke explicitly of empire, of expanding westward to the through the over the continent and even to the west coast, which is what, of course, happened. Um, so there's always been this American urge to, and it was always done. You can define an empire as having just to be really simple about it, a homeland, but with territories, expanding into territory, of course, in the latter, defending those territories. It's always in the territories that the conflict comes. And that extended then by the end of the 19th century into territories beyond the continent. And it was with the Spanish War that America became a true worldly important empire with Spain over in the Caribbean and then the Philippines. And at that point, we had a world kind of aspiring empire that rivaled the colonial empires of the European powers. This brings us to, of course, through two world wars and the Cold World War. And at the end of each of the three wars, America, the United States was the most powerful country. Those wars ended. Europe, two European wars, world wars were the devastation of Europe. And we won, of course, the Cold War. The empire again just fell, Russian Empire amazingly, with almost no violence, fell apart. And so here we are, now the world's dominant power still today. The dollar is supreme. The U.S. military has no one who can stand against it. But we're also like an empire, perhaps now declining. We're heavily in debt, crushing debt, a lot of dissonance within that leads up to deep resentment about American aims, both foreign and domestic. That's my very thumbnail sketch of the history of American empire. There were a lot of I wrote two books in the early 1990s about one was titled uh, The Decline of the American Empire, which ended up being mostly a history. And then the second book was entitled The Next Cold War, which we thought which I argued would uh, be a world divided into regional competing economic blocks. Uh, but who knows? So I have a poem.
I'd be curious. I know you're a poet for quite a few years, and it's called Empire, I believe.
Uh, yes, I can find it here. So it just kind of sums up probably in a more pleasing literary way empire. And so here it is. It's not so long, but I think it'll give you another sense of the great empires rise and fall over the millenarian ashes of fiery history, from Egyptian pharaohs to AI oligarchs. Their moment lauded universal and supreme to end history. As they sail down rivers of civilization, cross over oceans of the globe, and rise into the skies of space, reciting prophets of the axial age and promising bright ages of timeless rule as harbingers of art and industry, as moralists of justice and love, and as anointed saviors of life and death. Yet promises needfully become lies to cover the dark deeds of betrayal by conquerors of hearts and minds who speak war as peace, ignorance as strength, in the recurring and ever recurring years of 1984. And their castles of sand wash away in the web and flow of history. In average time of 300 years, becoming eponyms of decline and fall. Nineveh, Persepolis, Carthage, Rome, Constantinople, Tenochtitlan, uh, Mesoamerica, Berlin, Tokyo, London, Moscow, with Beijing and Washington to follow. The rise and fall always the same game of extorting taxes, extorting order, exalting good, wielding weapons of stone, bronze, and iron, machines of war, bombs of uranium, and ruling algorithms of silicon. And while history does not repeat, it rhymes no matter the times as an ideology. Now comes the greatest since Rome as exceptional shining republic of citizens bestowed with liberty and justice for all as states united, e pluribus unum, preceded by Caesars of Pax Romana, now by presidents of industrial democracy, proclaiming free world leadership over autocracy as West versus East and North over South, confirming Plato's prophecy of government from aristocracy to democracy to tyranny, living through Toynbee's life of civilization from birth and growth to decline and death. During the first rising of empire, when asked, why Greeks and barbarians war against each other, Herodotus would say only as a true Greek, it ever was to be, always empire to seek. So that's the poem. It's a bit long. I
When
apologize.
did you write that? When did you write that?
Well, like most of my poems, I write over again and again and again. I
Okay.
think it's about 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
Never finished writing a poem. I've learned that.
Yep. Yep. I hear you. I want to comment on the lines I circled when I read it. They rise and fall, always the same game. Dot, dot, dot. Well, history does not repeat, it rhymes no matter the times. Love that line. As an ideology of warring opposites. And so, Jim, for me, when I think of this, hits my work research on conflict. Um, it just seems like we cannot have this kind of conversation of history without a conversation of conflict. And in my doctoral and master's work, I started my master's degree, I focused on conflict, this idea of conflict management and how we're educating ourselves on conflict management. And so that was a real big scope sort of overview master's degree. And then I focused on fear in my doctoral work, as you've read some of my work on fear and why I've specialized on that. And what I wanted to just put together for you is this little formula: domination, conflict, fear, violence. Domination, conflict, fear, violence. DCFV theory. And my argument was understanding the dynamic relationship between those four components, vectors. One could probably do an analysis of anything and really dig into what are the issues. And I have this idea of that when domination is going to exist, and it is, and I see in your thesis, territoriality is
Yes.
instinctive. And I said, okay, there's my domination thesis. It exists. Accept it. We may or may not like it. Now, the question becomes for me is once you have domination or territoriality, then you have conflict. It's inevitable. Someone's stepping on someone's toes, and that can go all the way down to nematode worms fighting over a territory because somebody stepped into the other's territory and they say, get off my toe. So domination leads to conflict. Conflict is the resolver, potentially, if conflict is done well. It's the resolver of that domination dynamic, not to erase domination. It just helps metabolize domination so that it isn't so totally destructive for the system, for the whole, right? So conflict is really important to me as a mediator. It's a really important process of metabolizing the effects of domination. Then you got fear. So where does fear come in? It comes in when conflict management is not done well. And when it's not done well, more and more fear is bred, and then fear becomes the driving force. No longer just conflict, but now you got fear, and this fear of the dominator, fear of conflict itself. You get people who are conflict avoidant, and that doesn't help, right? And then in the end, if fear is not managed well, this is my thesis as it ends here, then violence is inevitable and cyclical. And I'm arguing that you could actually have domination without that toxic cycling of violence if you did the fear and conflict management in the middle properly. So that was my overall thesis. Comment from you on that at all. You don't have to, but
It makes total sense to me, and I would stress that this sense of domination or territoriality. Territoriality works with for me because I'm thinking usually of empires, and the territoriality is instinctive. All mammals have a strong instinct that I know of. I suppose somebody might correct me on this, but has has a strong instinct of my space, what's mine, and you see it. You get it right away on the individual level. My body.
yep.
Um, give me space. Me to you. Don't crowd me. Um, so it's a very instinctive. It's in our mammalian DNA. Um, And then it expands kind of outward from that. Uh, Family, territoriality for family. The best word for that, home, my home. Okay. And that's a very strong instinctive urge. Family, home. Next comes kin, tribe, our territory, our place that we have kinship and tribe. Um, and then this you can go back to the starting of human consciousness and civilization, but then it gets ordered right away into the struggle for land and water, what's ours, what's territory, and from then to the city states that we saw by 5,000, starting about 5,000 years ago in Mesopotamia and elsewhere. And then the empire, the kingdoms, and the states of today. And finally, the most maximum of territoriality thinking, the world empires that we still maintain. And I'm speaking specifically of the United States. The peace on our terms, on our humanistic terms, must be prevailed. And we could talk about the humanism part of it, and but that's another subject. So, you're right, and this is going on all the time. There's not going to be any resolution of this territoriality and this conflict. There's, it's not going to disappear through some kind of Hegelian dialectic where finally we arrive at an absolute. For example, Chardin, who talks about the omega point and
Okay.
complexity upon complexity more and more to where finally all complexity is, and it's the true. Also, I was rereading William Irwin Thompson. You're probably acquainted with
Yeah,
him.
a little bit.
Very, very widely read historian 2 generations ago. And again, how does all this end? Through scientific planetary civilization. Oh, okay. But no, that's not the human scene. And so far as I'm concerned, it never will be. But so you're right. We can deny these things and repress our ideas that, oh, we really don't want more than what we're entitled to. Yeah, I don't like conflict. However,
Yeah,
we have to know how to manage what is in our DNA. Yeah. So I agree with you totally on that one.
right, right.
We're doing a really bad job of it in the United States right now. There is no management. It's all conflict.
Yep. And the use of fear as a weaponized force, right? A weaponized emotional force that puts people into all kinds of fight reactions. And your basic job as a empire leader is to manipulate the fight and the flight and get it going in your direction.
Right, right. Yeah. So, yeah, you sent me recently about uh, the Los Angeles debacle of Trump sending troops in there when there was absolutely no need for any military, for even the Marines, a force of Marines was sent in there. And when the Los Angeles mayor, Karen Bass, complained, he threatened to arrest her in this vague kind of a way. It remind it reminds me of a mafia boss. You know, they don't say kill that guy. They say, oh well, just take care of him. Oh, we'll run it. We'll do it. Yeah, you know what I mean. Yeah, yeah, right. And he did the same thing with the governor, Newsom.
California
Newsom,
governor.
and the governor I thought handled it quite. Come on, come and get me anytime.
Yep.
But that's what it's come down to. My goodness.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, and this erosion of this grab of presidential power. It's always that is a long-term trend of power more and more since the 1930s, the office of the president.
Okay.
And um, to the point where Trump can say about the New York, there's a Democrat running for New York City mayor.
Yeah.
And I have a quote here.
Yeah. Read it. Yeah.
Trump says he's a communist. First of all, of course,
Yeah.
it's a lie. Uh, that goes without saying. If a communist gets elected to run New York, it can never be the same. Doomsday. But follow me. But if we have tremendous power at the White House to run places when we have to, we have all tremendous power to run things when we have to. That's the message. So, wow. When has a president ever talked like that? I can't remember.
Okay.
Maybe
Yeah.
Andrew Jackson in a fit of paroxysm. He wasn't well, I'm told, mentally. But yeah, it's chilling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you write in your notes here, the first time in history, territoriality, as we're moving and shifting very rapidly, is now moving beyond not a material or ideational or ideological dialectic, but now on and by AI, artificial intelligence, replacing and surpassing the human mind itself. There's just no dialectic, there's no rationality at some sense, and there's no boundaries. Can you expand on your investigations into Harari's work, Yuval Harari, and how it's helped you make sense of this new kind of territoriality, I suppose?
I guess if there is a final dialectic that where conflict dies out in a idea level, uh, it's with AI having all the information that exists to us as human beings, and far surpassing the information and knowledge we have as individuals. Uh, and it's the mind. It doesn't that information even right now no longer relies on individual human beings. It relies on big data clouds. I don't know where this is leading, except to whoever controls AI. There has to be some kind of control, uh, but it will always be without human input at the time. At the time, you simply turn on your quantum computer, and uh, every question is totally answered, and that will be how we resolve conflict as well, right? I mean, we're not going to sit down face to face and share and argue our views and try to come to a consensus. We will be there with our iPhones and our connections with information about how any issue must be by the data.
Right. Data driven.
Yeah. And it's so, yeah, Harari uh, talks about two things, really. Talks about techno-humanism, where the old humanism is gone, the one I'm kind of referring to, where we talk to each other and work things through in a democratic kind of way. Uh, the techno-humanism will be upgrading human minds according to the data that's available. We won't do our own thinking as individuals nor as small groups. The other key concept here is, well, he talks about the data religion, where we will have this reliance on information
Yeah,
that
so
no
it's
longer has,
immortal.
that no longer has human origins.
Yeah.
That's no longer set at the moment of that decision, of that management attempt about conflict. Yeah. So
It's a kind of immortalization project, isn't it? Of if I if we rely on this data that is not reducible to the human, therefore it's almost divine by its definition of not being relied upon in the human sphere. And saying, as I think Hari is saying, he's warning us as well, isn't he, that that's an interesting way to go and it might have benefit, but he's also incredibly concerned about it. Are you concerned about it?
oh, sure, sure. On one hand, of course, I want the best information. Of course, I want uh, knowledge as I can best find it on the internet, and I'll rely on that knowledge more and more now. I find myself just in my the years last few years here relying on online internet. You know, and we all know the nerdy person, the data religion, the two aspects that Hari emphasizes about AI are the techno-humanism that is involved and the data religion. Yeah.
And then Harari stresses, and taking from your notes, he says progress of civilizations, as we've understood progress, is that it's based on a core of social political values, not territoriality. And I'm thinking of what about values? I mean, if these humanist values of individualism, human rights, democracy, free market, if they start to become submerged, I mean, is there a value system replaceable? And so that's one question. Is there a value system you see replaceable or replacing, or is it just a big question mark? And I want to raise that while you're talking, our prime minister has written a book called Values in Canada, the new prime minister. And he believes this is the blueprint for the way to run new world affairs and economies is values centered.
Whose values?
Well, he's going to be picking universal values that he thinks work. And that's um, probably a lot of humanism and a lot of which will be kind of a global cooperative, global economic world order type of values that are useful, kind of UN nation like value systems and policies and principles. So he thinks we need to go back to that, and he's arguing, and I think he'll have some listening ears because the other alternative is we're going to go down this road of data and the new data religion, as you call it. Ultimately, Jim, is it's going to be controlled by corporate elite, and he's still trying to save government. So he's still an apologetic and a saver of rescuing that governments still have an important role.
I hope he's right. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I do too.
We're not getting any of that south of the border of your border, as you know.
No. Oops.
You might wonder how it is we do. And Canadians especially do, from what I've heard. how it is we elect this morally depraved neo-fascist. And but
So
there's
Jim, why don't you just track through your short-term crisis, um, and just take us through all of those points? I think they're so good of the factors in the short-term crisis. Just walk us through them all, like
yeah,
just
it's
punch it
it,
out.
it's
Let's
it,
go.
mostly we blame the Democrats for screwing up the two elections of Trump. But there's a number of factors that have come together at this time to create a perfect storm for somebody like Trump to take over and create a dictatorship. And he'll run for office. He'll declare himself
Yeah,
president for life
yeah.
at the end of his term if he's alive and at all healthy. He'll do that. We know. And so, how do we get this man? Well, first of all, there's the whole migration thing, and it was badly handled, especially by the Biden administration, of not enforcing the borders. Not north. You guys are okay, but no, it was south, and the terrible conditions that exist in Mesoamerica for most of those countries. It's terrible. But it just the border got overwhelmed, and it probably it was the decided election of Trump. It put him in the office. Yeah. So there's that resentment and government services over the years are no longer what they used to be. Development policies in rural America have all but fallen away. Farmers still get some surplus. That's about it. A USDA as a viable agency is what it used to be. The USDA built this country in the 19th century on agriculture, and all the technical expertise and support that the government could provide. So all that's gone pretty much. And the block grants used to be for cities and localities to these. Well, most of it's for military contracts, and so there's that anguish, especially in rural and small town America, about what about me? And that's led to populism. And there are kind of two parts to that: the economic populism of this great disparity of wealth and income now that has been going on for a long time since the post-war years, World War II years, but now is just it's a huge gap. It's never been this way before. So there's economic populism, and then there's the cultural populism against what we might call woke politics, where the Democratic Party especially urged rights for their what they thought was their constituencies of women, people of color, and the LBGQ factions, but it didn't work. The white straight male resentment was so strong, and especially in rural or smaller areas, women who weren't professional will vote with their husbands. They will. I mean, that's just the way it is. And so there's populism, both cultural and economic. And what allows what allows uh, Trump is this increase in presidential power. I mentioned it started actually in 1939, when the office of the president, the state office of the presidency was established, and that allowed the president all these assistance and expertise apart from the departments. The president office itself mirrored the departments. All giving a larger and larger office and employees and deputies and assistants to the president, giving him unusual power. Then we were warned by Arthur Schlesinger, wrote about the imperial presidency in the 50s. He was concerned. He called it the imperial presidency. He was concerned about even in the mild Eisenhower age that the presidency was acquiring too much power. And we see that especially now acquiring over government vis-a-vis the courts and Congress, with the president acquiring power over his party. And that's due to the corruption of money in politics that the president is in a position to obtain, where the president himself is a branch of government, a dominant branch of government. Yeah. Now AI comes, so there's all this resentment, even though the economy is macro indicators show that we have the world's strongest economy. Uh, but when you really look at it, well, who's really benefiting from the world's strongest economy? It turns out it's the coastal elites and the highly educated people. The country has been pretty much forgotten until Trump came along and reminded them that they're having only he and his MAGA movement can really solve these very factors that have brought us to this crisis and helped elect and determined to elect him. Yeah, so that's some of it. It's complicated. It's not one single thing. We're now suffering through uh, another Trump term. Counting down, there's 1,107 days left of him. Who knows what voting will be available? We'll find out a little more about that next year in 2026. But that's where we are.
Thank you. So you have a quote here, or it's at least an idea you put down, is Trump's is a capitalist builder of production control. Musk is an oligarch engineer of production efficiency, question mark. Both are media obsessed, Oedipal possessed, neither is rational. So now you're coming in with kind of a psychological at the end there, a
Yep.
psychological analysis. What does that mean when you say neither is rational? Is that possible?
Well, I guess you could argue, there's no doubting Musk. So you talk to him one day, and the next day it's a totally different story. It's a totally different policy. It's a totally different approach to solving problems, whether it's building a system or running a system. It's whether it's the engineer or the manager. It's interesting that I got that from Thorstein Veblen,
Oh, okay.
uh, who
Tell us
wrote a
who
book.
he is. Tell us who he is.
That, yeah, he wrote a book about the engineers,
Okay.
and he got the idea that engineers and managers would come together and form a
Sure.
perfect technocratic society,
Right, right,
very rational with goals,
right.
doing things that contributed to those goals. And Trump or Musk don't do either one of those when it comes to the goals and values of the country. Yeah. So, and he got that idea working with Herbert Hoover during World War One. Hoover was in charge with food distribution for the war in World War One. making sure the troops were fed, making sure that enough food was produced to keep the nation going. And it required a lot of planning, wartime planning, top down, good technocratic decisions being made about maximum production and efficiency. And and so Veblen thought that was uh, so we see it again here, uh, not Hoover and Veblen working together, uh, but Trump and Musk working together. But but right away working together. Oh, but they're not, are they?
No.
No, because this whole idea it's another kind of idea of we have that somehow this mess will work its way out if the engineers and managers got together with efficiency and conflict management.
Yeah.
We see no signs of it happening. In fact, it's just the opposite. It's gotten uh, probably worse than ever before, so far as dysfunction and conflict and the lack of any management or any kind of efficient thinking, even. Yeah.
So we've been talking pretty macro at times, and a lot of what we're saying, and then when it comes down to individual citizens, let's call them, in the largest sense, the individuals who are in these nation states under these regimes, what do you see as some of the ways that they have been impacted to, in a way, enable so one of the things you talked, obviously, if there's a class kind of huge disparity, people get desperate. They're looking for revenge. They're looking for me, because they feel like that's been not neglected. Is there other factors or elements that you've noticed being an American that is happening within the I'm kind of like talking more that individual psychology, particularly, but also positions of people, the citizens. What's happening as you see it that's supporting this kind of empire?
Oh, supporting this kind of empire. Oh,
Enabling.
yes. Billionaires. I mean, out of control. We talk about Russian oligarchs. My goodness. Uh, these powerful oligarchs, and now not just with AI, but that has now come up to our attention, are running our elections. And there's still enough people who somehow got the notion through primarily through public education that we are a democracy and and that our very human rights, our life, liberty, and happiness, pursuit of happiness, are being threatened by Trump and his oligarchs that support him, almost down to the last a billionaire. And these guys just aren't billionaires; they're multi billionaires. They're hugely powerful, and of course, they're using AI at their disposal. Yeah, so I don't know.
What do you think of the idea of Naomi Klein and her analysis of we've moved kind of from, this call it